welcome to another Thursday Thought. I'm Dave Smith, and joining me today is Kirk Davis here at Family Financial Partners. Kirk, how are you doing in this stay-at-home world that we find ourselves in? How have the last 5-6 weeks been treating you?
Well, I'm getting by right now. So the first couple of weeks of it were a little rough. I like to go to the gym every day. So once those got shut down, that was kind of a big impact on my life, because that's where probably 90% of my social interaction comes from. So to have that taken away was, had some adjustments I had to make there. But thankfully, our gym started doing all of their workouts every day, on Zoom classes. So I still get to move around and still get to see all my friends from the gym. Just now it's over Zoom. So yeah, we're getting there. But
Well, that sounds real good. And I actually have to give you a shout out myself, because a week, 10 days ago, I guess it was the NFL draft last week started. And I had seen that Kirk had made some beer bread that he had come up with online from some recipe. And I asked him, I said, Kirk, I need to know, how you make this. I'm going to try this. So I tried the pan of it myself, because it was the NFL draft and they had that whole, Bud Light had the whole boo the commish, right? Hashtag that was out there. I decided to put Bud Light, of course. I think it may have been from last year's Super Bowl, and use it in my beer bread. And it came out absolutely phenomenal. The kids ate everything but like 2 pieces of it. And so at the end of this thought, if it at the very minimal, you can just email Kirk after this and say, hey, I want that beer bread recipe, because it was definitely a winner. So, and Kirk, if you have any other recipes, throughout this, feel free to share with the audience.
Will do. I've been sticking to the bread though. So that's, I like to pick my winners and stick with them.
It's like your guilty pleasure in captivity, right? Usually this is the guy that you don't see eat any kind of carbs, right? And here he's making bread suddenly.
We all have to adapt somehow.
That's right. So today on Thursday Thoughts, what we thought we'd decide to do is take you through the Family Financial Partners logo, the puzzle pieces, and one of the stages of life. But before we get into that, I do have to throw out a disclosure to you. We are not attorneys. So if you had any thought that Kirk Davis or Dave Smith were attorneys or estate planners, no for now, forever speaking, we are not. Kirk plays one on TV every now and then. I've got a Netflix series coming soon enough that was shot in captivity. But outside of that, no legal advice should ever be taken from us. If there are things that you decide legally you need to do after this webinar, then please let us know, and we can certainly refer you to someone who can help you. So when it comes to the Family Financial Partners logo, a lot of you that walk into our office, you see this beautiful logo of a tree, right? You see the design on a wooden background with the Family Financial Partners name when you walk into our office, and on any kind of letterhead or things of that nature that you see. But a lot of people have never really actually heard the story behind why we did that. Well, first of all, we believe Family Financial Partners is a growing entity, and there is a long history of it. We just celebrate our 15th year this year of being Family Financial Partners. So we're super excited about that. But we picked the tree as our logo is because it's a growing entity. It's something that it doesn't, just like a tree, when you plant a seedling or a sapling, if you will, it doesn't immediately grow up. There's trees that I know that my parents have in their yard that I planted as a child and are now, 30 feet, 40 feet tall. But it took them a long time to grow to that height. And so here at Family Financial Partners, when we first designed our logo, we designed it with 5 parts, with the tree at the center of those 5 parts. And the 5 parts or puzzle pieces, if you will, of our logo are actually the 5 stages of life that we find a lot of people in. And so the first stage you can see right here is on your own. And for a lot of parents and grandparents out there, you remember what that was like, right? You either graduated high school or college, got that first job, had to find an apartment or a place to bunk, had to figure out how to turn on utilities, a rent bill came due, right? Water bills, all sorts of things. And you had to figure it out as you went. And you may have kids or grandkids that are in this situation that just in a few weeks from now, they are going to be officially graduating, though there'll be no walking, there'll be no cutting of the ivy. None of that, unfortunately, will be going on. But we will be covering the on your own category in the weeks to come on a timely basis for college graduates. So keep tuning in. The second puzzle piece is tying the knot. There's not a whole lot to be said about that other than that people are waiting longer and longer to tie the knot. People aren't necessarily getting married right out of high school or right out of college as much. They're waiting a little bit longer. And so because of that, when two people do come together, they're bringing in different financial pictures, they're bringing in different family pictures, and it's not as simple as giving the other person a ring, walking down an aisle with, hopefully in the future, more than 10 people, and saying I do's forever. There's a lot of other financial things and decisions that need to be made. And so what we do in that category is we help people look at their financial situation as they tie the knot to make sure they're doing everything they can to put themselves in the best position financially moving forward. The third area, of course, is the area we're going to cover today, and that's new arrivals. So we won't cover too much of that right now. We'll just wait for the topic to come up. But I don't really have to explain too much on the topic of new arrivals. I know a lot of the hard work is done. Then you wait around 9 months, and then voila, you've got a new arrival. The next category that we have, and the fourth of the 5 puzzle pieces, is pre-retirement. So this is when the kids finally are not coming home as much. Maybe there's an occasional load of laundry, right? There's an occasional Sunday dinner, but this is the stage we find where parents are coming to us and saying, look, all of these years, I took the time to make sure I raised my children. I gave them everything I possibly could. I got them their education. I may have even helped them get their first job through connections that I had, but now it's on them. They've now taken over their car payment or their car insurance payment, their cell phone bill, and they are gone. And so Dave, now that I'm not having to pay all those things, right? I have some extra money and I'm trying to figure out what I need to do with that extra money within the confines of, do I, pay off my house early? Do I pay off my car? Do I save my retirement more? Do I put some in an emergency fund? Do I buy this other thing that I've been deferring and gratification on I want? Because finally I have some extra dollars every month. And most people in this range have, let's say, just approximately 10 years or so before retirement. And so they've got some wiggle room time to make sure that they prepare correctly for what their ideal retirement looks like. And so it's a really fun stage. It's kind of I think honestly, of all the stages, it's the most fun because they kind of know where they are. They kind of know where they're headed. And a lot of the things they dreamed about up until then are actually becoming a reality. So it's a happy time of life. And then the last stage, of course, is the retirement stage. And I'd like to say this is a happy time, but from what I actually experienced seeing retirees, it's actually a very stressful time because you have people downsizing or just outright selling their homes, right? You have people trying to figure out what to do with their work retirement 401ks and who's going to manage it and how am I going to squeeze that money like the juice from an orange and get a paycheck and just live off the juice, but not cut into the orange so that it stays there for a while. You have people in that same stage trying to figure out, do I need to update any kind of legal documents? What do I do with Social Security, pension? I know these guys took their Social Security this way. I know this person took their pension this way that I worked with, but is that how I want to take it or what's right for me? A lot of times there's uprooting as that people are, literally my own parents are moving across the country to be closer to children in retirement. So there's a lot of stress at this stage of life and it's a fun stage, but at the same time, there's a lot of things up in the air. And so what we do in that last puzzle piece is we sit down with people and just help them organize all of the different moving pieces and sit back and say, okay, let's revisit what your goals are. Let's figure out where you're at. And let's put a game plan together. So again, just like every other stage, we put you in the best financial position to accomplish your goals moving forward. So that said, today, we're going to talk about new arrival and that planning stage. Now, when it comes to new arrival, just to kind of hit it off on a couple topics of conversation and thoughts, people are just simply having kids later. We're not seeing nearly as many people having children, 17 to 22, much less 22 to 29. we're seeing a lot of families start having kids 30 to 45. And a big part of that is people are not settling down and getting married until a later stage. And for a lot of you parents out there, you know that also your children are not moving out of your home until many, many years past the time you may have left home when it was you in their shoes. So that is a big change. In addition, when people have children, the average child from birth to age 17, it's $250,000, right, to raise that child. Kirk, how you feeling there, bud? I mean, no kids yet, right?
Yeah, that's not no kids, and that number is kind of a daunting number. It's not necessarily pushing me that direction.
You thought you were doing pretty good financially, and all of a sudden you just kind of took a hit, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, whew, it's a big price to pay.
And the funny part about that is, or maybe sobering part of that is that doesn't even include the education. So whether it's a trade school, whether it's a college education, whatever it might be, that doesn't even include that education component. That's just simply, formula and diapers and daycare and eyeglasses and medicines and band instruments and soccer cleats and everything else in the world that goes into it. And I can tell you from my stage, I've got 3 kids, of course, 7, 11, and 14, right? And so I guess by those numbers, I'm theoretically about halfway through that $750,000 that I got to spend on them. Honestly, if it only cost me another $375,000, I feel like that's probably a good deal right now, because these kids, it's absolutely amazing. There's not an hour goes by that there's not something that's coming at me as far as some kind of expense or need or want or you name it. So that is just a reality of being a parent. And I think a lot of people, they don't really think of the actual cost of having kids. And so that is just something really important to consider, much less if you have one child. It's quite different, of course, obviously, if you have twins, triplets. I mean, if you have quintuplets, I mean, I'm not even going to do the math on that. I'm just going to suggest there's probably a Marriott shuttle bus in your future. The reality is, though, that when that child is born, that is when the goals begin. And so if you're listening today, and whether you're expecting a child soon, right, or whether you have a 4 and a 1-year-old at home, right, and really haven't gone down the some of the steps we're going to talk about today and gone down and done some planning for what needs to happen for the children. The good news is there's no time like the present just to play catch up and to start putting a plan in place. And since we're all stuck at home, or right now I'm in the office, it's a good time to sit back and say, what do I need to do when it comes to planning for my children? So with that, Kirk, I know that you've got some points to share with us today on, what folks out there can do if they've got a child in the picture. What's the first step that they can do?
Thanks, Dave. So I think there's 5 kind of general steps I wanted to talk about today. So the first one is something that I like to call the oxygen mask. So most people have flown on a plane before. And if you think back to the briefing that they always give you right before the plane takes off, they talk about the oxygen mask. They say, if something were to happen and the mask falls down, you're supposed to basically put your own mask on and then help the people in the seat next to you. The idea behind that is, you first got to make sure that you're stable and taken care of before you're really in a position where you can help somebody else out. Now, if you fail to do that, you just put yourself and the others at more risk. So the same thing actually applies to our financial planning as well, especially when we think about our kids. So I'll often meet with new parents or expecting parents, and they start telling me about all these goals and blessings that they want to provide for their kids. Now, while that's great, it is important to sometimes take a step back and make sure that as a parent you've put on your own oxygen mask. Make sure that you already have a personal financial plan, in place, and you're on track to achieving those retirement, goals and, the other, financial goals that you have for yourselves. And then we'll go ahead and take care of the kids after all that's in place. Because the reality is, kids can easily take a loan to buy a car, to pay for college, to pay for their wedding, and to buy their first house. However, once you get to retirement, it's there's not really many options to take a loan to fund your retirement. And I know a lot of people, if I tell them plan for yourself first, they think that's that it just sounds off to them when they're wanting to provide blessings to their kids. But trust me, the biggest blessing, the best blessing you can ever provide your kids is just having the ability to not have to move back in with them once you've retired.
Absolutely, Kirk. I can't agree more. It's just not moving back in and or not becoming a financial burden on the children, right? And so it is. You're absolutely right. It's a fine line to follow between between setting the goals for what you want to have happen and truly experience with your children and provide for them, but at the same time making sure that that mom and dad take care of mom and dad and are okay with their retirement income, their pension, their social security, however they're taking their income, but they're okay with their money so that the kids aren't having to bail them out, if you will. So those are some really, really good goals. And I know that that kind of brings us into your next point.
Yeah, so the next one on the list there is the goals. So after you've already made sure that your financial needs are met, then you're on track for that, and we're in a good position now. We can actually start providing for the kids. And I believe the best way to do that is to establish goals, and those goals need to be as specific as possible. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer to what those goals need to be, but again, they need to be specific. So one of the most common goals that I hear from just about every parent that I talk to is, I want to pay for my kids' college. Now, that sounds great, but what does it actually look like? Do you want to pay the entire bill, or do you want to provide maybe just a certain dollar amount? Do you want them to live in a dorm, or would you prefer that they live at the house with you while they go to school? Do you want them to be at an in-state school where it's normally a little bit more cost effective, or is there an out-of-state school that you guys really like and want to send them there? Now, if you just became a parent now and you have a newborn at the house, thinking about these questions, I know it can be difficult. It's like, well, how do I know what they're gonna, or what school they're gonna want to go to 18 years from now? I get it, but still, let's try to dial it in as much as reasonably possible right now. And remember, we can always change what that goal is down the road. And the reason I want to make it really specific is because I find when we have a specific goal, it really allows us to kind of stay on track with those saving benchmarks that we need to hit, as opposed to a goal that's a little bit more vague or just abstract.
Well, that's a really good point on goals. And speaking of which, I've got a Sharpie here, Kirk. And I guess the question is, if I'm really goal focused, should I take the Sharpie and kind of make notes on my face or across my there's some lines right there on my forehead maybe, and just to keep things in front of me, so when I wake up and I go to the bathroom mirror in the morning, I'm kind of reading what my goals are. Is that a good way to keep track of my goals?
Dave, if you want to write it on your forehead or write it on the bathroom mirror, that's fine. You do you. I think there's a better way to do it, and that's not necessarily the answer that I would put out there. If you guys are already a client of ours, you're familiar with our planning checklist. If you're not a client yet, well, here's kind of a crash course on what the checklist is. Every year, we put together a checklist of the various items and things that we need to do to keep us on track for our goals, whatever those goals are. And we lay that out for you, so it's right in front of your face every time we get together and talk. In addition to that, there's also our financial planning software, eMoney, that we built out all those goals in there for you. So as you log in and just to look out your where your current balance is and where you've made progress or didn't make progress, you can see that real time in front of your face, and really there's the visual for you.
That really makes a big difference, just keeping those goals right front and center. And also as you get them done, being able to check them off. That's a big deal. What's the next step, Kirk?
So the next step is, well, once we've established that goal, it's the question always comes of, how much do I save and where do I save it? Well, if we stick with the idea or the topic of, paying for college, well, how much do I save is an easy answer. We just establish, what that goal is. So there's a dollar amount that's associated with that, and we establish what the time frame that we have, and we just work backwards and run some calculations to determine exactly how much we need to save on a monthly or annual basis to achieve that. So then comes the question of, well, where do I save this money? And with this, there's a little bit more that goes into it and a few more options that we have. Now, some states offer prepaid tuition. Now, we're not really going to go into a lot of detail on that because one, I'm not personally a fan of that option, and two, that's only available to some people in some states. So the two that I want to talk about are going to be the 529 plan and the taxable brokerage account. So each one of these accounts does have some advantages and disadvantages that are associated with them. In general, the 529 plan can grow tax-free and does have some additional benefits when applying for student aid. Both of those are great advantages. However, with the 529 plan, they do put you in a little bit of a box, if you will, and saying that you have to spend the money on what they call a qualified education expense. Now think of that as, tuition, room and board, that sort of thing. Now, if you decide to spend the money on something that falls outside of that box, well, then you potentially lose all the benefits of that 529. So now you're subject to some penalties and some taxes as well.
Kirk, the thing I think that's important to point out on that 529 is there are so many people that when we talk to them about saving money for their children's education, right, or family's education, the thing they focus on is not saving in the tax-free ability to pull that money out for educational expenses. What they focus in on is the idea that they're going to be penalized on any money they don't exhaust from the account. And what I can tell you is, in the 20 plus years of doing this, I guess 23 years now, I have not seen a single person where the child graduated and they didn't fully exhaust the 529 account. So to my knowledge, there's not been a single person, and we've had tons of people use 529s over the years for their children and grandchildren's education. Not a single person has ever paid a penalty on taking money out after the child went through school or because the child didn't go through school. I think the biggest thing is that, the conversation that I always have is you sit down with mom and dad and you talk about little Jimmy, and of course, little Jimmy, who's 7 and in first grade, he's going to be a rocket scientist. He's going to go to Harvard on a full ride scholarship and is the smartest 7-year-old that these two people have ever seen in their life. And little Jimmy, by the way, is probably sitting in the corner picking his nose during this conversation. But let's just assume that little Jimmy does go to college with a full ride scholarship. The majority of full ride scholarships anymore are not really full ride. There's usually either tuition or room and board, or they're just broken down in so many different ways. There usually are some expenses still that the family will have to cover for education. And so if little Jimmy has a sister, or another brother, little Susie, or little Davy, then if little Jimmy does get a true full ride scholarship and doesn't need that money can go to any of the siblings or any blood relatives for their educational purposes. So the thought is that even if you have a child that is way above normal as a 7-year-old or 4-year-old or 1-year-old or 6-month-old, right, and you just know that they're going to have it made, I would still, at the very minimum, look at like the educational cost of a University of Kentucky, something local, or if you're outside Kentucky, look at an in-state school for you. And maybe at least take half the amount of what college should cost, and start with that savings goal of at least half the amount. Because worst case, you're going to be to the point that you're going to have a significant portion of those education costs covered by the time little Jimmy gets to college, and or if little Jimmy gets that full ride, you can always pull it out. So I just think that's a good way of thinking through it, of saving towards the goal, but we don't necessarily have to fund 100% if the worry is that by funding too much of it, then my child, the rocket scientist, may not use any of it. So I just think a kind of a partial funding approach is a really good way for a lot of families to get in the 529 game and start saving for education. And that also then covers the topic of if you want your child to participate in their education funding and or figure out how they're going to fund it. Totally fine too. A lot of parents are not paying for school. And if you want to have them to have some skin in the game, this is a great way to do it. What's the second way, Kirk?
Well, the second way, so for any dollars that you're not going to put into the 529 there, the next place I like to look is just a taxable brokerage account. So with a taxable brokerage account, we're a lot more flexible with how we can actually use that money. So if we want to pull it out when they're 16 and buy them their first car, or use it to pay for school or a down payment on a house, or wedding, you name it, you can pull it out at any time. No penalties. The only exception is we just have to pay capital gains taxes on any kind of growth that's in the account. So the kind of trade-offs are we get more flexibility, but we do have to pay some tax on it there. Now, to decide, what the right option is for you and your family, well, we need to, kind of dive deeper into your goals and have some conversations about, what are some likely scenarios that are gonna play out, and just kind of, work through that. And it's not always a one or the other. Oftentimes we have clients that kind of blend the two accounts together to kind of build that overall savings strategy.
And Kirk, why don't we want to just open up a joint account with little Jimmy, that mom and Jimmy have together? He's 7. Why not put his college money in there? And then if he doesn't go to college, we can use it for something else, but it's in Jimmy's name.
Well, there's some disadvantages to that. So I like to think of myself when I was young that I was a pretty responsible person. But at the same time, when I turned 18, one of the things I did is I bought myself a Z28, because that's all the money I had. That's the coolest car I could buy at the time. So if we put the money into just a joint account, well, whenever your children do turn 18, whether there's $10 in there or $1 million in there, it becomes essentially their money. They have full access to it. And I know we like to think that our kids are going to be responsible, but the fact is most of us at 18 years old are not the most responsible, and we'll probably go out and blow it on something that we shouldn't.
No, that's actually a really good point there. I can't tell you the number of times that I've actually heard those kind of horror stories where the child did go in and empty the bank account and disappear, and mom and dad are going, "What just happened?" They're supposed to be enrolling in college and they're driving down Route 66 or something. So, well, what's the next step that folks should consider, Kirk?
So from there, I like to look at life insurance. And I always ask the question, what is the ideal situation for raising your kids? Or what do you think the ideal situation for raising your kids is? Some families are going to tell me that, they're perfectly fine with sending their kids to daycare while, both of them go out and work a full-time job. Others want one parent to stay at home, whether it's, for a few years while the child is young. Some people want one parent to stay at home, indefinitely, essentially. Now, again, there's not a right or wrong answer, but whatever answer that you do pick directly relates to your life insurance needs. If your plan is to send your child to daycare and the both of you, go work full-time jobs, maybe you only need enough life insurance just to reliably replace each other's income with the mindset of not making any major adjustments to the budget and just funding those further or those future goals from your monthly cash flow. Maybe you want to tack on a little bit extra just so you can kind of lump sum fund the big ticket items that we have. Now, if your plan is to always have one parent at the house, then we need enough life insurance to make sure the surviving spouse has a large enough nest egg to safely support the family until the kids are grown, and still have enough to either continue to not work outside of the house or have enough to supplement income that's, frankly, if you leave the workforce for 18 years or so and try to go back into it, your income potential is probably going to be a little bit lower than if you were working all that time. So we want to have enough income or enough life insurance to kind of supplement your income there.
One thing that brought to my attention on that was just maybe talk a little bit about just group benefits and life insurance and how that plays out.
Yeah, so kind of after we figure out what that number, what the life insurance number is, then we look at where do we get our insurance from. Now, we have two kind of main places we can get it from. We can get it from a group policy that we get from work, and we can also get it on the individual policy outside of that. Now, there's pros and cons to each one. With the group policy, it's really easy to get. You just sign up at work with your benefits, check a couple boxes, and put your signature on a page, and you're done. Now, the problem with that is oftentimes they don't provide enough coverage. And if you leave that employer for any reason, and I know kind of hits home with a lot of people right now with getting laid off work or losing your job due to COVID, that insurance suddenly disappears. So with the individual policy outside of the workplace, there's a few extra steps we have to go through, but we always have that policy, whether we're working, not working, or kind of in between. So that's kind of some things I like to look at there. Group policies are great, but I use them more so as the supplemented individual policy.
And why so?
Well, I like to guarantee that we have the insurance there. That's kind of the main thing. Plus, whether we actually get an individual policy or not, I always want to encourage my clients to go through the underwriting process to get life insurance. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, when we go through the underwriting process, it's going to tell us that, one, we may be able to actually get a better rate than what we're getting for the group insurance. And two, if we get a really high rating, it's kind of telling us that the underwriters, who are essentially professional gamblers for the insurance company, they're telling us that you're going to live for a long time. And if you get that highest rating, well, that tells me that I need to plan your retirement income to last, to 100 or even longer.
So now we got that person, with the great insurance rating. They got their own policy. They've got a little bit through group. They're in a good place. They keep working. They're pretty much set, right? There's nothing else they need to think about.
Oh, I wish that was the case, but it's not. So we kind of go into that fifth step that I like to look at, and this is the legal documents. Now, kind of going back to the disclosures that Dave put out at the beginning of the call, neither I nor Dave are attorneys, so we can't really speak into any detail or give the legal advice, but there's a few things we need to look at as far as legal documents go, and a few questions we need to answer. Now, one of those questions is, if something were to happen to both parents, who do you want to be the legal guardian of your child? Is that the same person that you want handling the finances? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I mean, we've seen cases where we talk to parents and they say, this person, my sister is, a great parent, but she's not really the most financial savvy person, and I don't really trust her, managing the funds. Whereas my brother, he's, maybe not a great parent, but he's really good with the money. So we can kind of blend it there, but we need to have those conversations and kind of lay it out. Another thing to keep in mind is if, both parents were to pass away and everything goes to your children, well, that's the house, any equity in the house. That's 401ks, that's IRAs, that's money that you'd save, specifically for the children. Lump sum payouts for the life insurance. We can very quickly get well over $1 million. Now, do you want your child the day they turn 18 to have, access to $1 million right away? Some parents are fine with that. Others say, hey, I would rather have them put some training wheels on the money and give it to them gradually, as they get older and mature. Now, these are questions that sometimes we don't like to answer or even think about, because nobody wants to think about their own demise. But it's something that's very important. And as with everything, there's not a right or wrong answer. But let's have those discussions now. Let's put everything out there, and or equally important, because everybody has some kind of idea of what they would like to happen in their head. Go talk to an attorney and have them lay out the actual document, the legal framework, so that what you have in your mind is what's actually executed should something happen to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'd add one more to it is don't just go to the attorney, but when you go to the attorney and they lay out the documents and they say, do you want to go home and think about it? And you go home and take the documents home to think about it, actually go back to the attorney and execute the documents, sign them, right? I can't tell you how many people that they've said a goal is to get their legal documents in order with us, especially new parents with children, right? It's one thing if you don't have any legal documents and there's no children, but it's a whole nother can of worms if, something happens to mom and dad and there are, minors, because then we got to decide, and or the court decides who's going to be the guardian, right? And who's going to potentially be the financial trustee, and are they going to be the same person that's taking care of the kids, that's also deciding what kind of minivan or sports cleats or schooling the children receive. So I know all of you have in your mind kind of what you would want to have happen, and the natural thing to do, like Kirk said, is to go into the attorney and talk to them and get them to lay the documents out. But then the key thing is make sure you sign the daggum documents, because there are so many times where we've had people that have said, oh yeah, I've got them all taken care of. And then you ask them a couple years later and they say, oh yeah, I found them in a box and I realized I hadn't even signed them. And I go, oh my gosh. So please make sure you sign those documents, even once you do decide with the attorney what you want them to say. So that said, Kirk, you want to take us on just a brief little quick recap for folks on just reminders of what they can be doing in this stage of life?
Yeah, so essentially five topics we want to talk about. One, the oxygen mask, making sure that you are prepared yourself. Then going into setting those goals and trying to be as specific as possible with them. From there, once we have those specific goals, we can talk about how much we actually need to save to achieve those, and the most efficient place to save that money. From there, we'll look at the life insurance, make sure those coverage levels are appropriate in the worst, so that if the worst happens, our goals are still realized. And then the last step there is make sure that we have the legal framework in place to make sure if something, even the absolute worst happens, what we want to happen is actually going to happen.
It's tough stuff to talk about, when we're talking about birth and death in the same conversation. But I think it really is something that's very important to those folks out there that are at this stage. Whether you're in this stage or of someone in this stage, a family member, a neighbor, grandchild, you name it, please pass this on to them. Please let us know if they have any questions, or if you yourself have any questions on this. You can reach out to Kirk or I. Here's our email addresses, or you can call the office at 859-219-1006. That's 859-219-1006. We are here nonstop all the time to educate you and make sure that you are taking the correct steps to make your financial future as bright as possible. So thanks for joining us on this Thursday Thought. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.